Hello, and welcome to this preview of Act Two, which is one of the most famous acts in all of Shakespeare. Um, and I just want to sort of lay the groundwork. So if you've never experienced the play before, you can read it and watch it and be grounded in the text and have a clue as to what's going on. Now, if you remember, Act One begins with Romeo and Juliet having fallen in love at first sight at the party. And the nurse informs Juliet after Juliet asks, "Who is this? Who's that man?" And the nurse says, "His name is Romeo, and a Montague, the only son of your great enemy." And it ends with that sort of cliffhanger. What is she going to do falling in love? It's interesting. Even it seems like the nurse has bought into the drama of the moment, right? This is a 13-year-old girl who just met a guy at a party. But these lines in the end of Act One make it seem like it's completely life and death. So we begin Act Two with a quick scene with some of Romeo's buddies that I'm sort of glossing over. I think they're good reminders that Romeo has a context. If you're a teenager reading this, you know that your parents are very concerned about who you hang out with, and they always want to know when you're going out, who are you going out with? And they want to know their parents, and they want to know all that. Well, I think Shakespeare on some level was aware that young people, just like adults, have a context that they operate in. So you have, Benvolio is this kind, sweet, peacemaking cousin. You have Mercutio, who's sort of the sex-crazed, guy with the dirty jokes and the big personality. And there's all these different people. So that's the first scene. The second scene, however, is the iconic scene in Juliet's balcony, and I want to really walk through this. So first of all, excuse me, I want to be mindful just on a literal level as to the danger in this scene. So maybe first of all is the reminder of the very first set of moments in the play where the prince says, if you ever should disturb these streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace, that any further violence will lead to your execution. So that's, as I said early on, that's the oxygen of this entire play. Secondly, at the party, Tybalt here from the Zeffirelli film is incredibly upset that Romeo has entered into the Capulet space. So you get the sense that if Tybalt had a chance to go after Romeo, he would. And thirdly, to get to Juliet's balcony, Romeo has to scale a large wall and jump over into this private piece of property. Nowadays, there's a good chance there would be a no trespassing sign. And I just think, oh, by the way, my cat, Camille the literary cat, has joined us for this discussion. She's very curious about Renaissance drama. So anyway, there's sort of a law enforcement threat. There's a family rivalry threat. And then there's the fact that he's probably breaking the law. He's entered into this other person's property late at night in a world where you are not supposed to be with women privately if you weren't married. So it's incredibly risky just to enter this space. If you go to the beginning of scene 2, they're very famous moments, and Romeo talks to Juliet like the older generation of men were supposed to talk to women they were trying to impress. This is old-fashioned. Romeo says, if you go to the beginning of Act 2, he begins by responding to Benvolio and Mercutio, but he begins on the second line of Act 2 with seeing Juliet enter from her balcony. It's dark, and Juliet doesn't see him. Romeo says to himself, but soft, quiet, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. So comparing Juliet to the sun is like such a cliche. It's beautiful, but just to be aware, this is like a very traditional way of talking about women. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou, her maid, are far more fair than she. So that Juliet's more beautiful, more fair than the sun and the moon. Be not her maid, since she's envious. Her vessel livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady, it is my love. Okay, they met a few hours ago. Oh, that she knew she were. I teach teenage boys, and that's probably the predicament of a lot of them. That they look at a girl they love and they think, oh, my love. I wish she knew she was my love. She speaks, yet she says nothing. Her beauty speaks for itself. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I'm too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. So now he's talking about her eyes are like stars. She's like the sun. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars as daylight doth a lamp. I mean, it's nice poetry, right? Her eye in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. See how she leans. This is, you know he's smitten with love. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. And then she just says, I, me. She's, just talking to herself. And he responds to that. And then she says on line 36, the famous line, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? And I always tell my students when we're doing these previews, mark up the books when I read something out loud. In fact, anytime a teacher reads anything out loud, you mark it up. Wherefore is the key word. It's the one that hardly anybody pays attention to. It means why. Why are you Romeo? Meaning, why are you from the wrong family? If you were just Ted or Frank or somebody else from another family, this could work. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Pay attention to the fact that Romeo is all about feeling here. He's comparing her to the sun and her eyes to stars, and that she's beautiful, and he wishes she was the glove in her hand so he could touch her hand. Juliet is talking about identity. Why are you from this family? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, line 37. Or if thou wilt not, but be sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. And Romeo, as an aside, wonders if he should talk to her. Now pay attention to how Juliet thinks. She continues in 41. 'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, although not a Montague. She's making a distinction that would have been revolutionary. We are not our family. We are not our name. This is a world where you can't be. The idea of being your own person is a new modern idea. In this day and age, whether it's medieval Italy or whether it's Shakespearean England, you were your family connections, your family history, your community connections, your work. You didn't have a private identity. That's a new idea. Juliet has that idea. What's Montague, she says. It is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face. It be some other name belonging to a man. And then the famous line, which is, again, revolutionary. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other word would smell as sweet. So she's driving home the point with a beautiful image that our identity is not our family name. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for thy name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. And then he interrupts her, finishes her thought actually. I take thee at thy word, call me but love, and I'll be new baptized. Henceforth I never will be Romeo. Okay? And then Romeo is super romantic, and Juliet is super practical. She says, what man art thou that thus bescreened in night so stumblest on my counsel? She just wants ID. Who are you? And he says, by a name I know not how to tell thee who I am. My name, dear saint, is hateful to myself because it is an enemy to thee. Had I it written, I would tear the word. And she admits she knows who it is. My ears have yet not drunk 100 words of thy tongue's uttering, yet I know the sound. Art thou not Romeo and a Montague? And he says, pretty cleverly, neither, fair maid, if either thee dislike. And then she worries about the practical implications of him in and her outside her house. How camest thou hither? Tell me. And wherefore? So why are you, how did you get here? And why are you here? She doesn't talk about his face and his leg and his muscles, right? She said, the orchard walls are high and hard to climb, and the place death, considering who thou art. If any of my kinsmen find thee here. She reminds him of the danger that I talked about earlier. But listen to Romeo. He's good. I mean, you got to give him credit. He says, With love's light wings did I o'erperch these walls, for stony limits cannot hold love out. And what love can do, that dares love attempt. Therefore, thy kinsmen are no stop to me. Whether that's crazy or not, that's good, right? He says, she responds, if they do see thee, they will murder thee. And he says, and again, he's good. Alas, there lies more peril in your eye than 20 of their swords. That's good stuff. And then he says, I have night to hide me. And then again, she asks in 84, again, more practical stuff. By whose direction foundst thou out this place? Like, how did you, Google Maps? Like, how did you find out this information? So I just think it's interesting when they're alone, how they process things, and when they're together, how they're very, very different, actually. Then this really just revolutionary speech. Bear in mind, this wasn't at the Globe originally because it debuted a few years before the Globe opened in 1601. But the original audience of this play was full of women who probably had never made a real choice for their own life ever. And then watching this 13-year-old girl, watch what she does. Line 90. Thou knowest the mask of night is on my face. Else would a maiden blush bepaint my cheek for that which thou hast heard me speak tonight. She kind of is a little shy about how forward she is regarding her love of Romeo. Fain would I dwell on form, fain deny what I have spoke, but farewell compliment. Blunt, dost thou love me? She says. And then she doesn't let him answer. She knows what he's going to say and responds to that. She says, dost thou love me? I know thou wilt say aye. Like, yeah, you're going to say you love me. Sure, guys do that. And I'll take you at your word. Yet if thou swearest, thou mayst prove false. Lovers' perjuries, they say. Jove laughs. Gentle Romeo, if thou dost love, pronounce it faithfully. Or if thou thinkst I am too quickly won, I'll frown and be perverse and say thee no. So thou will woo, but else not for the world. In truth, fair Montague, I am too fond. And therefore thou mayst think my behavior light. So she says, look, if it's better if I play hard to get, I can do that. But look, do you love me? And then she says on 105, trust me, gentlemen, I'll prove more true than those that have more coying to be strange. I'm going to be blunt and honest with you. I'm going to be more true to you than the women who play the game, right? Play hard to get. I should have been more strange means play hard to get here. I should have been more strange, I must confess, but that thou overheardst before I was aware my true love's passion. Therefore, pardon me, and not impute this yielding to light love, which the dark night hath so discovered. So she said, well, I'm just telling you everything because you overheard my real thoughts when I didn't know you were here. But look at how thoughtful she is and how deliberate she is. She then, a little later, as we'll see, proposes to him. We'll get to that later. Go to line 130. Juliet says basically, sweet repose and rest come to thy heart. It's within thy breast. And Romeo says, classic teenage boy, oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied? Presuming he wants at least a kiss. And she says what she should say. What satisfaction canst thou have tonight? We met like an hour ago. What are you talking about? Romeo recovers. The exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine. So pay attention to what Romeo wants here. Yeah, he probably loves her, but he wants physical attraction, physical affection. Listen to how she says it, line 138. Romeo says to her, for what purpose, love? And she says, but to be frank and give it thee again. And yet I wish, but for the thing I have. And listen to this. She says, my bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more love I give to you, the more I have, because both are infinite. She's a lot more philosophical and thoughtful and psychologically grounded than he is. He's just hormones, kind of. So two very different conceptions of love. If you go to line 149, actually, is when she proposes. She says 3 words, 149. 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If thy bent of love be honorable, thy purposed marriage, send me word tomorrow. She proposes to him. And then lastly, and this is a little interesting detail in terms of the play. Their first meeting, obviously, they speak a sonnet together. By the end of that night, they're actually finishing each other's thoughts. And I said a lot of the play is written in blank verse, unrhymed iambic pentameter. Watch this. There's a moment here where Romeo says, so thrive my soul. Juliet says 1,000 times good night. So thrive my soul 1,000 times good night is one line of iambic pentameter. As is, shall I send to thee at the hour of 9? And I would I were thy bird, sweet so would I. You might have grandparents that know each other a long time. And as I said in a previous video, Nana might say, can you go to the store and, yeah, get some milk? I know. They're already doing that. So that's Shakespeare in an almost musical way showing you that they're connected. Now, a couple more things. They're engaged hours after they meet, and their families hate each other. So what they're going to need are adults who aren't family to enable them to get married. Obviously, in medieval Verona, you're going to need a priest. So Friar Lawrence is a friar. He's a Franciscan friar, Order of St. Francis, known for their love of nature. And evidently he's a friend of Romeo's. So Romeo goes to see him, and we can presume that he's going to see him to help him elope with Juliet, get married to Juliet on the sly. Now, when we meet Friar Lawrence in the next scene, excuse me, if you go to line 15 of Act 2, Scene 3, Friar Lawrence says, O mickle, which is an old word for great or powerful, mighty. O mickle is the powerful grace that lies in plants, herbs, stones, and their true qualities. For nothing so vile that on the earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nor anything so good, but strained from that fair use, revolts from true birth, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice sometimes by action dignified. And pay attention to the next 2 lines, and Romeo hears them. Underline these. Within the infant rind of this weak flower, poison hath residence, and medicine power. Just like in human relationships, herbs and flowers can be both poisonous or medicinal, or like medicine. Pay attention to that as the play goes on. Obviously, Romeo, if you go to line 61, Romeo says, in response to Friar Lawrence, basically, what do you want? Romeo says, plainly know my heart's dear love is set on the fair daughter of rich Capulet. Now, the last time they talked to each other, he was in love with Rosalind. So Friar Lawrence, as the old guy, says on the next page, line 69, Holy St. Francis, what a change is here. And then pay really close attention to what Friar Lawrence agrees to do. Romeo comes in the room, asks him, doesn't just say, I'm now dating somebody else. Says, I want you to marry me and this other girl I just met, and I've forgotten about the other girl I loved that was the last one you knew about. Think about Friar Lawrence's position. He knows that the Capulets and Montagues hate each other. He says on line 96, this is page 89 of the Folgers, but come, young waverer, come and go with me. In one respect, I'll thy assistant be. For this alliance, you and Juliet, so happy prove, to turn your household's rancor, hatred, to pure love. Friar Lawrence marries them in the hopes that their marriage can bring the families together. A good conversation would be, is it ever good to get married for reasons like that? And then Act 2 ends. I'm spending less time on this, but we're reminded again of Romeo's friends looking for him. They're not reading Romeo and Juliet, so they're looking for him. We have the nurse, who's Juliet's sort of sponsor in all this craziness, right? Because the parents aren't going to allow it. So the nurse has to support this secret marriage. Friar Lawrence has to support the secret marriage. In Act 2, Scene 6, lines 35 to 37, is the end of Act Two, and it's Friar Lawrence taking them away to get married. Come with me, and we will make short work, for by your leaves you shall not stay alone, till Holy Church incorporate two in one. So the film version that we watch is about 28 minutes long of Act Two. And then the homework is to listen to that great YouTube audio drama. These two particular scenes really read well, the balcony scene and the Friar Lawrence Romeo scene. And then pick either, using quotes from the play, how do these two strangers fall in love so quickly? And then the other option is, what is Romeo's argument to Friar Lawrence for marrying him and Juliet? And do you think Friar Lawrence's agreement, his reasons for agreeing to marry them, are good reasons? That's what my students write about. I hope the video has been helpful. Good luck with Act Two.